The other thing that I think could be quite interesting to discuss is how local supply should be. And this is something Guy kind of gets dragged into quite often, seen by some of the very small local box schemes as almost as bad as a supermarket. Whereas, I believe your supply is more local.
We grow it all.
Yeah. So it'd be interesting to and I guess being in London, there's a question mark about how local can we grow food for a population like London. Should we even be trying to grow local food? I know Julie Brown's here from Growing Communities, which has a network of local farms supplying into London. We'll have a particular view, but I'd be interested to how local should we aim to go?
You don't want to, on the same terms of my statement, we grow it all, compare Guy's gross with our gross, because we're a tiny little operation. We sell 90% of everything retail because we're close enough to customers in a small rural town, and they love our food, and it's a very nice business model. What the city should do is pay attention to history and realize that the need for the land around cities to funnel food into cities for thousands of years has been the demise of many civilizations, and maybe we should have more people on the land. And all those people are claiming, oh, we'll need twice as many farm workers. I think people might be saying, yeah, but I think I'd rather do that than what I'm doing.
And I guess our problem in this country is that where cities traditionally have been settled either around a river or around good farmland, and then as the city or town expands, the first place we build on is that really good farmland. So we're losing, we've lost an awful lot of our grade 1 best growing land in this country, and we're likely, there's a lovely CSA farm on the outskirts of Bristol about to be put under a car park. So it's in a small island like ours, where we've already lost a lot of the good soil, that is a challenge. What about you, Guy? How local should we be?
I would dearly love to run a farm like Eliot's, and I do kind of romanticise about it a bit. In fact, after Riverford became employee owned, I have gone and bought a farm just a mile up the valley where we do grow things on a very similar scale to Eliot's, and I do absolutely love doing it. So I don't know how I created this monster, but it is, we produce a veg box every 3 seconds. We employ 650 people. Well, I shouldn't say we employ, they own it now. And I was at a meeting this morning where they were discussing what they were going to pay themselves. It is a different model, and I don't think scale has to be bad. It's just that it usually is. And I'd like to think that we're going to try and prove that it doesn't necessarily have to be. I mean, as for distance, my God, we're full of it. We're all bloody hypocrites, aren't we? I mean, everyone eats lemons and bananas, don't they? I mean, Geety, my wife, who used to run this pub, actually, they were phenomenal in that they did actually run it pretty much. I think she did allow lemons, but they weren't able. I think that was about the only thing that was important. And actually, they turned out some absolutely fantastic food. I was wondering whether there's anyone in the kitchen who was around in those days. I think they are quite glad to get the occasional orange now. But anyway, don't know where I'm going with this, really. I just think pragmatism is part of life, really. And I suppose I might say, who's going to grow it? On our farm, 35% of the people, well, in the fields in the summer, more than 50% are East European. I've got to throw this back at you, Ben. You spent years trying to run a thing, trying to persuade people to train to be horticulturalists, which you stopped doing. Tell me if I'm wrong in describing this, because not enough people wanted to be horticulturalists, essentially.
Not quite. But
not quite.
Not enough people want to train. But yeah.
The reality of it is, and I suppose I do feel, and I don't know how much dignity there really is in crawling up a row of carrots on your hand and knees, or pulling them up by hand, which I did for years. I mean, I could do about a ton of carrots in a day on my own, about 400 kilos of leeks. You know, we have a machine that can harvest, you know, a ton of carrots in about 10 minutes. And it does a better job of it than I did by hand. I mean, we live in a country where 7% of GDP goes back to farmers. Roughly 10% of GDP goes on food, but a tiny proportion of that, less than a tenth, actually goes to farmers. And we're not going to produce food with only 7% of GDP going back to farmers, other than with some degree of scale. Having said that, I mean, I've already been going on about, you know, large-scale dairy herds, a movement which I feel very anti, actually. And I see the way that most strawberries and vegetables are grown in this country, you know, with a field full of 100 caravans with 600 Bulgarians living in them who have no involvement in the local community. And I have to say it seems entirely wrong. I mean, I'm definitely a Remainer, but one thing that does excite me about the possibility of Brexit is getting back to a smaller, more human scale of agriculture where people who work on the land are part of the local community, and, you know, all those things which I do think are very important, which we are losing at a really alarming rate.
The one thing about scale, I have no objection to the scale anything is done on, whatever businesses it is, whether it's making autos or growing food. The key to me is the inspiration of the person running the farm or the business. And I have seen some absolutely spectacular large farms where, like me, the owner was a total nutcase for quality. And quality and the ability to feed exceptional food to people was high on the list of company policies.
That's very interesting you said. We had a meeting at work a couple of months ago, and we were talking about, in some way, trying to clarify who we wanted to trade with, whether they're in Europe or pineapple growers in Togo and whatever. And actually, one of the things we came down to is that the owner, or at least the runner of the farm, had to be involved and have a passion for what they do. And I do think wherever, you know, whatever it is with food, if it's run by an accountant rather than a practitioner, you're going to have crap food. You know, you really are. It might be okay the first year, but it will get incrementally worse every time there is a distance between the person who does have a passion, whether it's a baker, a brewer, a vegetable grower, a dairy farmer, a cheesemaker, whatever. You know, it has to be made by someone who has a love for what they do rather than a love for money, really. You know, you're going to have dreadful food otherwise.